Welcome to Built from Scratch. On this show, I interview entrepreneurs under 30 to hear about the stories of their initial success. My goal is to encourage the next generation of leaders to take action and make a difference. I'm Eric Lemie. On today's episode, we have entrepreneur Shaun Karakkattu with Atlog. Originally from Dubai and raised in Phoenix, Shaun studied economics and history at Vanderbilt University. While at Vanderbilt, and after leading United Nations-linked projects like Imagine Land 2040, he co-founded Atlog, an AI voice agent for physical retail that handles customer service and collection calls. In 2025, Atlog was accepted into Y Combinator's first spring cohort, and the team graduated right as Shaun was completing his degree at Vanderbilt. Shaun is on a mission to bring helpful AI into real-world commerce and make technology serve outdated industries. Shaun is only 22 years old. Shaun, welcome to the show.
Thank you for the bio. You did a really good job.
Pretty solid, right? That's some of that's chat too, which is pretty cool. Chat helps us out. Had to be, we're talking AI today, so had to be on brand there. Yeah. How we like to start every episode, Shaun, is going back to kind of early days and what life looked like when you were growing up. Because I feel like it's important to know as a founder, like, what were you like? You obviously have this level of success now, but what did it look like at the beginning? And if we were a fly on the wall back when you were maybe elementary years or right before then, What were you doing? What were your hobbies? What did life look like for you?
I was always like in the advanced classes. Like I was always reading in school. My parents, I grew up outside of Phoenix, Arizona, so in Mesa, in a like typical American suburbia. Like I took the school bus every day to school. Like that's the type of kind of environment that I grew up in. I ended up going to like an elementary school called Basis, which is like a super like kind of intense like preparatory academy. So that's like kind of where all like, you have all of these intentions, you have all these goals as a kid, right? Like, oh, like I want to get through this book for AR reading or whatever it is. And when I went to this school, like I took logic in 7th grade and like took all of these like kind of advanced classes for a 5th, 6th, 7th grader. And I think that really like carried me a long way, like of like teaching me a lot about the world in a very like focused academic environment.
Interesting. I'm curious, like even before going to school in Mesa, the move from Dubai to Arizona, like how did that come to fruition?
Yeah, so my mom works in the medical field, so she got the opportunity to come to the United States because of like her job. So we moved when I was in Dubai. I didn't really go to. I was like really really small, so I really started out my first kind of like preschool, like Montessori years. I went to Montessori, which I always rave about because it's just like a really good way to educate your child. Like that you get a lot of like more creativity and play and fun in that way. And we moved to Casa Grande, which is like in a city like a really small town in Phoenix. And my parents really wanted to live in a little bit of a bigger place, so we moved up to Phoenix, so like in the Phoenix suburb area. So yeah.
When you came from Dubai to Arizona, was one of the intentions too, like, let's put Shaun through like a really like advanced program, like this will be a great opportunity for education that'll lead into other future opportunities for college? Like was that part of decision making?
Yeah, I think my parents obviously like really wanted to come to America because like they were thinking about, how do I provide a better life for my like kid than I had for myself. So, and I think that has like, they like are super proud of me, have been super supportive in everything I do. And all of my different endeavors, like my parents were my biggest supporters, which has been really great. And I think even as a little kid, like, like I would want to like go to the library after school and like, like even those like little things of like driving me over, like doing, I did like soccer as a kid too. So like even like take me to soccer practice and things like that, like I feel like parents have to put in a lot of effort after school. And for a lot of years, like my dad was an accountant, but he tried to work from home just like so he could spend more time with us. And also like my brother, I have a little brother, so he was born, taking care of him and things like that as well. So
your mom was in the medical field, your dad was an accountant. Was there any other like entrepreneurial influences you remember early on? Uncles, aunts, neighbors, maybe?
Yeah, my uncle's a really big pretty big business owner in Dubai. So my dad actually worked for him. My dad has like a knack for entrepreneurship as well. He was like doing his master's in commerce, like when he moved to Dubai. Like my uncle gave him a job, and then he like worked. It was like, and in that time was probably a startup, but it's like a very big company now. And my dad has always had that like business fervor in him. And now he owns like a couple small businesses in Phoenix, like around the valley. So that's been really cool to see his progression too, of like, like having a traditional job and then becoming an entrepreneur himself.
Do you feel like seeing him do that inspired you like earlier on to be like, wow, my dad is taking this on? I kind of, maybe not at the time, but like later on, you're like, that's kind of what I want to do.
I think there's like a skill set that comes with that, right? Like you see how like someone manages crisis, or someone manages like having to, talk with employees and things like that. So it's always like I think there's a skill set you learn even just like observing someone manage a business. It's like being in class and you like see how your teacher teaches, right? So it's like, that's what I feel like a lot of kids are like, oh, I really had this person like help me become the best business owner. So yeah, I would say like seeing him in a lot of different scenarios was like very fruitful for my own business, because I could see like, oh, like what would my dad do in this situation? And even as we were like developing the business now, I would always go back and ask him for advice as well.
That's super cool. So back in that time period, Shaun, did you see initial inklings of entrepreneurial spirit from you, as in like, was there any little mini business structure you were setting up or ideating on, like back like when you were in like that high school or like elementary school? Did you have those things going?
In like middle school, I would sell stickers on like random websites. It was just like a really easy like business. Like you buy like a bulk stickers on Amazon, and like people want like one sticker, so they'll just pay $2 for a sticker instead of $10 for like 100 of them. So I used to do that for a while, which was fun. And then I did a lot of volunteering stuff. So like I like really knew I wanted to go to a good college. So like I spent a lot of time in like the brain tumor research organization, and then also like volunteering for this like nonprofit. So we did a lot of like businessy things. Like we did a lot of fundraisers and stuff like that. And then like work with local businesses. Like we did like the Savers fundraiser. We like donated like hundreds of pounds of clothes, and like I think sometimes like entrepreneurship is not just in like making money for yourself, but also like making your community a better place. Like I really took a lot of that like leadership energy and like put it toward that. And like it was like peak COVID, right? So we were like trying to figure out like the biggest event of the year was like a run, like a 5K. So it's like, how do you do a 5K during COVID? So we like re-engineered like doing a virtual 5K, like getting the software.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And doing all this stuff. So I think sometimes like the biggest thing in like entrepreneurship or like having that spirit is like finding the opportunities that you have. Like, it's not always about making money. Like it's like the skill set to be an entrepreneur, I think you can learn through in a lot of things. And a lot of that is like having responsibility, being able to lead, and having responsibility over others, like being able to delegate properly. So yeah,
that's cool. So, and that's what I noticed too, when I looked into some of the stuff you worked on, Shaun. It's like a lot of these like community pushing initiatives where I can see it, at least my outside perspective, it's like not necessarily that there was a business around it, but there was some initiative that it almost felt like you were more of there's kind of two types of entrepreneurs. It's like the missionary and the mercenary, right? So the mercenary is just like going to go and just sell, just hustler. But the missionary is like really passionate about a solution to that solve some world problem. And I saw that. So it was really cool. And so now we just fast forward a little bit, because you grow up in Mesa, and you spend the time maybe observing your parents, kind of what they're doing, see some inspiration from your dad, and you get this creative spirit. And in high school, I saw you had a really cool opportunity to work, or at least it was by the PBS NewsHour. You were a part of it's called the SRL, the Student Reporting Labs, and this is a perfect example of you're hustling to go and like figure something out and like doing something that is probably not typical for a high schooler. So tell us about that. I feel like that would be kind of an interesting segment.
So I had I was always like interested in the news. Like I was on the weather channel when I was 12 years old, just like the weather kid, like did all that like cute little stuff. And then when I got older, I was like, like we were doing all these community initiatives. So like, as I mentioned before, like I think we got like over 100 like ambassadors and like students involved over that short period of time for the walk. So like that experience really led into like us fundraising a lot of money. I think the organization usually fundraises about 120,000 every year. So I was like really involved in that. And then at the same time, I started this like doing research in a lab. So like in downtown Phoenix, there's this lab called the Translational Genomics Institute. And I was doing like sex-based differences in glioblastoma. So I was really just like trying everything. I was a big like, let me try as many things as possible to learn about it. So I was like doing brain tumor research at 16, right? And it was just like an opportunity for me to learn. And then I got this opportunity at PBS to like put all of this together into a video and like really think about like how do you teach someone about a brain tumor, like what do you want to tell them, like, and I was like really just talking about the project, the science that I was doing, which was really cool. So it was like kind of like a piece on myself, which I was like, this is like it's like cool to like think. And the fellowship was like science journalism, so it's like how do you tell the story, or like how do you tell any story? It's like marketing in general, right? Like how do you tell a story in a digestible way so like someone understands what's going on, because like brain tumor is really complex, like there's lots of like antibodies and enzymes and all of these things, like reactions happening. So I think that was like a really cool opportunity, like again, like it was like peak COVID, right? So it's like everybody was on their phones to be able to like tell a story in like kind of a digestible way. And that was like one of the biggest things I learned through that, was like how to like give people this like information, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so you have this experience, and it's like, and I just see like little inklings of like, you're super passionate. You're just curious. Like you're just like trying to figure stuff out. And then you go through high school and you decide you want to go to Vanderbilt, and it continues at Vanderbilt, but you decide to study economics and history. And I'd love to know, like, you have all these life experiences. You were already like hustling, trying to figure stuff out, very curious. Why did you choose that going into school?
Yeah, this is a big question a lot of people ask, because it seems like kind of a diversion from what I had been doing. And I think in a lot of ways, like I just really liked economics. Like I think I kind of always tied it in with like the studying behavioral science. So like I like worked on brains, like how they operate, like the kind of the biology behind it, right? And then I think like as I was coming into school, I like found Freakonomics, the kind of podcast series and the books and everything. And then at Basis we do senior projects. So like every senior, like you do take capstone classes and you get a project. And my project was like kind of the idea of like different voting patterns and like how like behavioral econ played a part in that, political psychology, like these like those kind of big ideas. So I read a lot of the Freakonomics books, consumed a lot of the podcasts during COVID, and then also like the Stephen Levitt kind of like way of thinking about the world. I thought was really interesting. Like I was listening to a Freakonomics MD podcast the other day. Like even like it's just like these little things like you just like don't think about, like how like X might affect Z and like what the correlation is between them. So that's why I got super interested in economics. And when I wanted to major in economics and history, Vandy was just like one of the best programs in the country. And right. I think throughout all of my classes, like had like super in-depth like economic history classes, which are particularly interesting because you can see like economics is all about like the consumer, right? Like you're thinking about the individual and how they're spending money, and then also like how every individual decision gets catalyzed into like a larger nation's thought, like economic theory. And I always like to say like economics is a study of like how people make decisions and how people make purchases, like where they take their hard-earned money and spend it. And the history is just like an amalgamation of all of the decisions that have been made, right? Like someone like a hunter-gatherer had to decide, like I want to live, I can farm in this river valley and like create a civilization, right? So it's like even like those like super like old decisions someone made like thousands of years ago are things that impact us to this day.
Right on. What do you feel like is going before studying economics or getting into Freakonomics, before and after? Like what is your big, like if you could just consolidate that down to like one lesson, what is the one thing you'd say like, holy crap, that changed my complete perspective on everything?
I just like always thought like one decision, like you always think like one decision has one impact, but like I think only later in life do you realize like one decision could have 100 varying levels of impact.
Like a tree, the tree just keeps getting wider and wider.
And you might see the like the 70% impact, but you could have 20% impact on someone or something, and like you might not realize it's happening in the background, right? It's like these like missed effects almost.
That's crazy. So there's a quote, I think Steve Jobs said it towards the end of his life, but it was one of the things he said is you can never connect the dots looking forward, but you can always connect it looking backwards. And so it's kind of like that, where it's just like you realize, and it's kind of like that, oh, I get it now. And it's like all these things like, and he was speaking more from like a spiritual standpoint of just like how the world kind of works. But same thing. It's like one of the craziest things is he took typography or like type class in one of his college classes, and that turned into like Apple fonts later on, like how that was, but it had no core, like he was just like, what a throwaway course, but then it came back. But it's like that decision then sparked into like hundreds of others. So it's just interesting.
In economics, like one of the things people talk about a lot and a lot of like economists look at is like the natural experiment. Two things happen like separately, like due to chance, right, in two different places, and then you can study like, oh, like how did it impact people here and how did it impact people here. And I think I'm pretty sure like some of them are like the rollout of Medicare, like some states implemented it before others, so you can take like the 5 years Medicare was in California and the 5 years Medicare was not in Texas, and like see the difference is in the populations and how it impacted. And that's like just like a basic natural experiment, right? Like you like obviously like California did not implement it 5 years ahead, so like an economist could study it, but like that data just exists in the world, and a lot of economists, like a lot of economics is like going out and finding this natural experiment data and like really putting together like these really, really interesting papers. Yeah.
It's so vast, and I'm sure AI is going to just change the game the more and more we keep looking at that. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So we go through your elementary years, you come to high school, go to college, economics and history, and super passionate about this, get into Freakonomics, and you're like, oh my gosh, blowing my mind. And then somehow we get to your passion to fight malaria. And so it was one of the videos I saw that you started working with an organization. And I'd love to know, like, if you can connect the dots, like how did you get there from those majors?
Yeah, so I had always been interested in government. So in high school, I worked for the mayor of Mesa, like the Mesa like youth council, like we did policy papers and things like that. So I'd always been interested in government. Came to Vandy, and like econ and history, like you're kind of in the government like sphere anyway. Like I'm taking all these classes. So I worked at USAID actually right before I worked at the malaria campaign. So I worked at USAID, which is like the US's international development organization. And this was during the Russia-Ukraine war. So like I like just like wrote policy papers and like helped the kind of the development representatives like put together different briefs and stuff like that. So that experience kind of led me to like learning more about government, being interested in like, oh, like development, like international development's a really cool space. Like would love to work in that one day. And then my parents are from a state in India called Kerala that is like, has like a really high human development index. Like one of like, it's like the most developed state in India. So I've always been interested by that model. Like it's called the Kerala development model. And they've employed it in lots of other places. They're like trying to employ it in lots of other places. And the idea is like the GDP is like not that big, but they have really high like human health outcomes. So it's like people are healthier, people are more educated, and they have access to basic social services, which I always thought was really fascinating. So that all of those experiences kind of led me to be interested in this UN type of space. The malaria campaign actually is a part of the UN Foundation. So they have like different campaigns that they run, and became interested because I wanted to work in the UN space, and I saw that malaria was like such a big issue worldwide, and also such like a pertinent issue because as like I kind of take that health background, right? Like I have this health background, and malaria like gets worse as the climate gets worse because the biggest thing is like climate change is more rain, so in warmer environments there's more pools of water, and the pools of water is where the mosquitoes breed, right? So like that's really where you're seeing kind of malaria spread. And then on top of that, like just like the warmth and how fast the mosquitoes breed causes mutations. So that's why like there's only so many, like the more and more mutations are, the harder scientists have to work to kind of prevent that. So it's just kind of like a consortium of all these interests. Like I was interested in UN government work, like the health background, and then also like climate change as well, because the UN is like a big mover in the climate space. So all of those interests kind of came together for my work in the malaria campaign. And I went to COP that year, which is the Conference of Parties 28 in Dubai, actually, which is like kind of cool to go back.
Wow.
But that was like the UN conference. So they brought out like imagine all your world leaders are there. Like the Paris Climate Accords was signed as the Paris COP. That's the easiest kind of way to explain it. So that's where they really decide like international legislation, what climate legislation looks like, and like they have this big forum every year. So
what do you feel? What do you feel like from being around United Nations? Because that's cool. I mean, it's like a global stage.
Yeah,
you're a part of that to some level, and it's like working on projects that support it. What was like the takeaway there? Again, what changed your mind? Things you didn't know going to, okay, well, my perspective has shifted.
Yeah, I think coming into college, my big thing was like the idea of governance, like how well can you govern an organization, right? Both like being someone who's interested in government and also in business. So I don't know, like my pitch when I joined my business fraternity in college was like, I love governance, like even from like a entrepreneur perspective, like how do you run a company? How do you run a 100% company versus a 10% company versus a 10,000 person company? And I think the UN is like very similar, where it's like a big amorphous organization with lots of different kind of like the work I did in one sector is completely different than the work I did in another sector. So I think it's so big and so vast. Like a lot of people just don't realize like how much it's doing all the time. And people are like, oh, the UN doesn't do anything. And it's just, you might not realize that program is of the UN, right? So like that's the biggest thing that I learned. Like I would go just like to random places. I'd be like, oh, like that's a UN program. Like that's so cool that, our global government funding, right, is like going to help people in need all over the world.
That's so cool. Yeah. That had been such an interesting experience. I saw that and it was another thing. Like, I was like, wow, that's so cool. Shaun got to experience that. But you come, so this is part of your college career and you come closer to the end of that college career. And just kind of a funny story you outlined in our pre-interview, Shaun, is your now co-founder was in your business fraternity and he kind of saw what you were doing and he's just like, hey, Shaun, you want to come join out, which was a totally different business than what it is today.
Yeah.
But walk us through that story of how you got involved with your co-founders.
Yeah, so we were just friends. So he wasn't in the business fraternity, he was in the engineering fraternity, but they're like pretty similar. So we like just met randomly, like we were both RAs at college and like we're friends and things like that. So he kind of like reached out to me because he really wanted to start a business and he's like super interested in the YC kind of ecosystem and like startups in general. So we met through like the Vanderbilt Innovation Society called Vines, Entrepreneurship Innovation Society. And one of the biggest things there was like we did like these little cohort programs where we like thought of ideas, like ran our own startup, and I think like through that we just like became better and better friends. And then toward the end of junior year, he reached out and was like, "Hey, like I'm thinking of starting a business. Like, would love someone with like a business acumen to like help like with the sales process and customer discovery and things like that." And I was like, I'll of course, like you're my friend, like of course I'll help you with that. So that's kind of how it started. And I always like to say, like, it was actually quite crazy. Like our first customer was a cold email I sent out the first day of cold. Like one of the first 5 emails I sent out was the customer that eventually converted, which is like just like super lucky.
That is like, yeah, insane. Yeah,
like, and I tell that to people and they're like, what? And I was like, yeah, it's just like built out that relationship, really proved to the customer that we were the right team to do it. And it was like a long drawn out process, obviously, like with any contract it usually is, but yeah, it was pretty good.
So he reaches out to you towards the end of your school career, but I'd be curious, like what was your original intention? Because this kind of was almost like a seed planted, like, oh, okay, like what did you think you were going to do after school?
Yeah, I always thought I was going to end up in government or like government consulting. I like was in this business fraternity where it's like where I really learned about all of these different types of careers. And I like did a volunteer project freshman summer, like very basic. Like I just helped the organization I had worked with in high school. And that was kind of like what I did for the summer. I did a little study abroad as well. I wasn't really thinking about career. And the year after, I really wanted to travel and I really wanted to work for like a bigger company, like learn more about like what corporate looked like. And I ended up getting an internship at Southwest Airlines, which is really cool. So I got to kind of travel all over the country for that. And also like just learn from a really interesting team. I was on like insights team, so it was a lot of like the psychological behavioral heuristic stuff that I loved like during my coursework. And then from there on, I just like did the consulting recruitment, ended up working at a company called Alvarez and Marsal, and their like federal practice in DC, which was a lot of like working with government entities and organizations. So like kind of looking at government from more of a business consulting perspective, which honestly was like a really really cool like set of experiences that you get, because it's like government is notoriously inefficient, right? And consulting, the whole point is like to make these organizations more efficient. So I think it's often like much, I think, better if you're consulting for a government organization versus not. And this like it might be a hot take, just because like a business like has lots of things that they want to improve upon. Where like government, like you have to push some buttons. There's a lot of bureaucracy, right, in a lot of instances. So I like thought I was going to do that full time, like work in this government sphere, whether that is in consulting or get into actual government work at an agency or something like that. So that's kind of the mindset and like the path that I was going on. And when he asked for me to join as a co-founder, I like just took the opportunity and like had a really great time with it. And once we got that like success, like somewhat successful, like getting that cold email back and then being interested, like that really like took us, like we like took our wings from that, you might say. Like it really like fast forward the business, like we incorporated really quickly, like and found a lot of success. And that's kind of when we decided to apply to YC as well. So yeah, I would say like it was just like a little bit, it's like a little bit of innovation, a little bit of luck, like being in the right place at the right time, but also like taking every opportunity that I had. I interned every year I interned every semester while I was in school after my freshman year, just because I was like, I want to be putting myself in as many situations as possible to learn as much as possible, so that one day, like if, I wanted to run my own business or run a campaign or whatever it is, like I would have this like wealth of information,
the skill set right on. And so when he came to you and asked that, and you had this intention of going into government, it sounds like it was, but still there should have, I would guess there was still maybe a little reservation. Like this is a pretty risky path. Do you remember, like, I suppose describe for us what you felt when you kind of made that decision that, all right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm not going into government stuff after school.
Yeah, I like basically like was working on three things at once. So like I was like going to my consulting internship, coming back home, working on Atlog, and then also working on the film that I was working on called Imagine. So like my whole life kind of got consumed by the startup and the film. That's what I was like that the whole year I was like, oh, I'm working on the startup or I'm working on the film. And we just like, I just honestly like thought like, why not take a risk? Like I'm only 21 years old. Like there's lots of time, like if to do lots of different things. So it's like I like had experience like 10 weeks of like putting on the the white shirt and the like business formal and like going into the office and all of those things, which like genuinely like I really enjoyed the job. Like I don't think I think it was less about the job and more so about kind of taking that opportunity to take a risk, which I really genuinely enjoyed. And then also like I'd finished a lot of my coursework, so I was like in school, taking a couple of classes because I was on scholarship at Vanderbilt, so it didn't make sense to graduate early. So while I was there, I was like, okay, like I have, like who doesn't want to be at school, like working on other stuff, like getting to like hang out with their friends while working on all these different types of projects, but also like learning so much. And I think like we ended up like, at least the film side, we ended up incorporating that into a nonprofit that my like other, like some of my other friends are currently running as well. So it was like kind of, took up like two businesses, like one for profit, one non-profit. So like that was a very cool experience as well, being able to like see these two like seeds grow at the same time.
Interesting. So decision might not have been crazy tough because you were like, you know what, it's going to be a new experience, and that's the biggest thing that you're looking for.
Yeah.
But I'd love to know, because I'm sure you jump into the actual business and you're like, holy crap, this is a lot harder than I originally thought, like running my own business was. What is that going from you having that conversation with him, sending a few of those initial cold emails, getting maybe a customer, maybe a few, but what are those next steps in business? Like, what decisions are you making to really get this thing rocket fueled off the ground?
Yeah, I think even just like the legal stuff can be like complicated, especially when you don't have funding. Like you were putting your own money up, right? So in a lot of these situations, we were like figuring out like, oh, like who's going to pay the incorporation fee, and like how are we going to get through this, and like what like does this startup look like? Even like before closing the customer, right? Like you have like the intention of having a customer, you have the cold emails, right? The bucket, then the next bucket is like customers that have an interest that might buy, and customers that will actually buy. But at some point between the cold emails and the customer that buys, like you have to set up like the legal framework and how you're going to take payments and all of that type of stuff as well. And also like the technology that's running the startup, right? So I think in a lot of instances, like being a little prepared, right? Like betting on yourself, like putting together those like initial costs, I think is a big part of it. And then I think just being in that university environment, like you're like we were pushing ourselves every single day, right? Because we were like, at the end of this, like we want to be better business owners, better students. Like you're in that learning mindset, which I think in a lot of instances is like, I feel like a lot of business people are like very anti like going to school, but sometimes like when you know how to get an A, or like when you like can envision like what it looks like to be a perfect student, you can also like take a step back. Like if you can zoom out, right? Like you're like, this is what perfection looks like in education, and this is what, you know, failure looks like in business, right? And I think we kind of took that like on ourselves to like both take on those upfront costs, but also like make like know that we were going to fail over and over and over again until we like the right dart hit the board, right?
And so you're talking about funding, because now you're thinking about like jumping into the YC program and like at least starting that, and that opens up a lot of doors. But I want to make sure before I touch on YC, because that's a huge part of the story, is there any other details between you getting this thing off the ground, setting up that framework, and then the YC program that you think was a key part of the story?
I don't know. I was just like running these two companies at the same time, which was really cool. It was just like I would come home like after school and just, or like go to my dorm and just like work on both of these, and just put in a couple hours every week. And then once we closed the customer, that was a really point where we were like, we should apply to YC. Like clearly someone has an interest in our product, like they are using it. We were happy. And that's kind of when we made that big decision.
So when you get to YC, one of the things that you shared with me is you had an original idea of a business.
Yeah.
And you got to YC and that thing just flipped on its head and you completely went a different direction. So tell me what that experience was like. You get to YC and you start working with them, and what did you find out?
In a lot of instances, like YC is like a very short period of time. It's like 10 weeks, right? Like a little less than 2 months now, or like between 2 and 3 months. And in that time, like we were building the same idea that we had and that we closed a customer on, because, we thought we had a market validation. We got one customer. And I think in a lot of instances, like it's really hard when you like have traction, you have feedback, you have someone who's interested in the product, and we just like couldn't replicate that again, right? It's like, I think we really like got a 1 in a million with that initial customer. And then we would send out cold emails, like warm intros, go to conferences, like do all of the things that we were told to do. And we really didn't see the traction, because I think we built something we think they wanted, and just the person that we first sold to happened to have wanted that, but that wasn't the case for the market as a whole. And I think like as soon as we realized that, and I think our mentor in YC, our partner was the David Lieb, who's the founder of Google Photos. And something that he would say all the time was like, guys, like, who are you building for and why are you building for them? And he's like, go talk to users, which is like really like solid YC advice, is like talk to as many people as possible. And then you also have to think about like it's like very easy to be like, oh yeah, like I have this problem. Like, like you guys are running such a cool business and like I have this problem, I totally use it. But then when you ask them to pay for it, like, does it actually make a difference for them, is when you can see that. So we were in lots of conversations where people were super excited, and we were also super excited because, if you have only done sales once, it's like you don't really know how to replicate that function. So we would be in some of these sales calls, and at the end of the sales call, we were like, oh yeah, we totally have this, like let's send the contract over. And we'd send the contract and like crickets, right? Like no idea, like we haven't heard from them in weeks and things like that. So I think that's when we really realized that like as soon as like someone put their money where their mouth is, like that's how we knew that they needed it. And that's the reason we pivoted, because as I was saying before, like we were making something with the intention to sell it instead of making something to solve someone's problem, or like a solid problem that they had. My co-founder always has like a hair on fire problem, is like what he calls it, right? Like they need something to fix it right now.
Shaun, in the first time we chatted in our little pre-interview, you gave me a quote and you said, find the problem and work backwards. Like that's perfectly defines what you're thinking about. So you go and try and get this first customer, and then you realize it's not this problem that their hair is on fire and they need to get solved today. And so you realize there's a pivot that needs to go from what you were doing to this new iteration. So I would love for you to clearly define, like, what did version 1 look like? And then what did it morph into that you felt was really solving that problem, to finding that problem and working backwards?
Funny that you said version 1, because we originally were like an institutional management software, institutional knowledge management. So imagine like like a really good way to like manage your file versions. And we really pitched it as like GitHub for businesses, basically like your company's knowledge, better access through AI. And then we stopped trying to sell that and then moved to solving a problem of a real operator. And now we implement AI solutions, currently voice AI calling for legacy industries, one of those being rent-own furniture stores and tire stores and things like that. So really like made the switch because we talked to real people, understood their part. Like we went to a store in Illinois, like sat like in the store, understood this owner's problem, and like that's the real way we were able to build versus just making something and trying to sell it.
It's cool because you said in 3 weeks of time, you make a pivot, you work on the product a little bit, but 3 weeks of time, you went up to 36,000 in ARR. So like just like shooting off. So did you, once you talk to these customers, you're like, boom, we got it. This is like super clear. Yeah. And it just clicked, everything came together.
And the story's often a little bit more, it's often easier to tell than like living through that experience because we were super stressed because YC does demo days and demo days like, so you might have 100 companies in the batch, right? So like 100 companies in your cohort, they all present on the same day to investors. And we were super stressed. We were like, we have 3 weeks to go. We have nothing on the table. Like we really need to think about what we're going to do to showcase this to investors. So we went out to we flew out to Florida, we flew out to Tampa. And that's where we like started talking to more customers and like it was like a conference type. And we were like, we were like praying to God. We were like, we are going to land one customer from Florida. And it just like kind of all came together. Like obviously like they knew we had this we like made it very clear like, hey, we have this deadline. Like we know you want the product. Like legacy industries are slow moving in the first place. Like that's what we're trying to solve. So it was like us like having some issues there, like in that instance. But it was like such a problem from them that they were willing to like not bend the rules, but like put in the time and effort from that, like as a customer, right? Like to get the right approvals and to get the contract going and to sign it and send it to us before that we started. And we were honestly like every day felt like a week, every hour felt like a day. Like it was a really committed process. Like it takes a lot out of you. And during that 3 weeks, like I was in Missouri for 2 of those weeks, like literally traveling. Like I think I drove like 1,500 miles like through Missouri and Kansas, like going store by store by store. And like I went fishing in the Ozarks and like played golf at a conference with with our customers and just like trying to do as much as we could before demo day to sign as much ARR as possible. Because honestly, like from our perspective, we wanted to show some traction because we knew it was an idea that we would have worked because our customers were that invigorated about our concepts.
Right. So you just were doing like cold outreach to get in front of these people like, hey, you're this type of store. Like, can we just like sit down and have a conversation?
Yeah, cold outreach. And also like we did a lot of like cold emailing, which is like emailing them being like, hey, like we have a solution. We have seen other people in the industry love it. We think you'll love it too. We got a lot of people in pipeline through that. Like lots of people reached out to us, which was really cool. And then during YC, we like do a launch video. It's like a big thing that YC does where it's like YC has like a LinkedIn page. I think pretty sure it's like over 1 million followers. So a lot of people followed the page. And we were I think the most popular video, one of the most popular videos of the last batch. We like got so many reactions like on both LinkedIn and Twitter, and like so many people saw it. So like a lot of inbound from that. So we were getting these like positive signals of like, okay, like clearly people want the product, like they're reaching out to us, which is really good. And then we like found this association of all of these stores. We like thought we like hit the jackpot, right? So we found like, and they were super helpful and supportive. So it's like a consortium of all these stores like under one kind of umbrella organization, and they have these like small state level conferences. So we actually are going to like the bigger like national conference next week, which is kind of funny. So we're going to be in Omaha, but during like the YC time, we went to Florida and Missouri. Those were like our 2 big conferences that we attended. And honestly, it just like gives you that like you have the owner right in front of you, right? So you can just like get like, I was like, it's the best user interview. It's the best like a pitching session. It's the best feedback. It's like, because you can see it live on their face, like whether they want it or not, whether they pay for it or not. And like that type of feedback is like, that's the value I think of in person of like a small conference. Like I think sometimes people want to go to like the conference with 100,000 people at it, right? But it's like the value in each conversation is diminished, I think, in a lot of those instances. Wow. And here it's like every conversation we're having, we're learning something new about the industry. So
crazy. I'd love to know, to wrap up your time at at YC, like you got to hear from Brian Chesney, I believe he was Airbnb guy, and then also Sam Altman it sounded like they were like right in the mix at some level. Maybe you gave a presentation or something, but tell me about that. Like, I feel like that's pretty cool.
I think being at YC is like really surreal. Like, I think the experience is surreal in itself, like especially with like all the AI innovation that's going on right now. Like seeing Sam Altman, I always like to say like we were in the motherboard, like we were in like it was really funny. Like Gary Tan, who's the president of YC, came out and he's like, Sam Altman was there and he was like, oh, this is your like open AI commercialization team. And it's like all of us like building AI companies. Like I think Brian Chesky was like a kind of different era of startup, like this like 2010s marketplace. Like he was a design student, right? And he like took those skills and experiences into his startup. But I think he was like talking about like Airbnb was originally like an idea for conferences, like for conference housing, and that he would like before the DNC in 2008, he was making Obama O's, like cereal boxes with Obama's face on them and stuff like that. So like we just got to hear a story and like hear how much grit and like force that he had. And it's like back in those days, like he was telling us like, who wants to go live in a stranger's house? Like that's what Airbnb was. Like people thought it was a really weird idea. And oftentimes like he was his own user. Like they built the website, they got someone to sign up, and he, like Brian Chesky, was the first like Airbnb guest at this Airbnb, right? So even like that kind of perspective, like we got, like, I think a lot of tokens of wisdom between the both of them. Like obviously Sam like was the old YC president, like had a lot of like kind of startup advice, and for him he was like, oh yeah, I was developing OpenAI for years, right? Like it came out of a YC research lab, right? So they were just like a bunch of computer science PhDs doing research, and now I think we can say like has revolutionized technology in itself, right? Like the whole, like the markets, the industries, all these big things that we talk about. So I think like again, like just a surreal experience in itself.
That's crazy. No, that had to be like seeing them live, and it's like you see like all these interviews and everything, and then like they're changing the world. They're changing the course of history right now, and like you're in the same.
Sometimes it feels like you know them because they're famous, you know, and you have to like. I'm always like, I don't know this person.
Yeah, this is the first time we're seeing each other. That's crazy. Yeah. So I'd love to know in all these. I mean, basically a couple of years that you've been working on this, but like all this time, what do you feel has been the hardest part of the journey up to today? Like, what is that thing that you're like, man, that really tested me, may have quit. I really didn't want to keep going. Hardest thing you've had to go through?
I think when we always like to call it pivot hell, like really trying to figure out what we were trying to do. I think those were like some of the hardest moments, like during YC and during this history of the company, of like, how do we decide what to switch to, and how do we know that we're going to believe in it? And something that our YC mentor would always say is like conviction. Like, are you, like John Shu is one of our other mentors. He created like the Robobot and all this stuff, but he would say like, are you convicted about your idea? Are you convicted about it's like, where's your sense of conviction coming from? And I think that really put things into perspective for us, where we were like, oh, like we believe in this, right? And he was like, there's two questions YC founders have to ask themselves. Like, do you believe in your idea? And do you believe that it can be a good business? And the second question is, would you be happy doing this for 10 years, right? So we were balancing these two questions, right? Like, do we believe the ideas that we're having can be a good business, and can we see ourselves doing this for the next 10 years of our lives? So like those are kind of the two questions that, you know, we were presented with. And I think as we thought about that, like during pivoting, it was so hard because like you both have to believe that it'll be a good business, and also like, is this something I want to do for 10 years? Is an even harder question to answer, right? So I think in a lot of instances, like some of your hardest moments running a business is when you're coming up against failure, and you're really at the bottom, and you're not getting any traction, you're not having any customers, and you know, you're really trying to find like who would be a good customer in this instance.
It's like, is it worth it? So it's like all this toil and effort and sacrifice, and it's like nothing's really happening. It's like, am I
putting in, like, I think that's the biggest question of startups, right? Like if you get a normal job, like you put in time, you put in energy, you put in effort, and you like eventually will get promoted, right? Like at least in the normal world, like a normal job, like W-2 employee, like that's the hope, right? Whereas a startup is like, you can put in a maximum effort every single day over day. And like, you might not be able to will it up off the ground. Like, it just, sometimes the cards are stacked against you in some ways. And I think often, like, people become 2-time founders or 3-time founders. Like, they'll have initial success and it'll fail and they'll try again. Right. And I think it's like one of the biggest things about like YC and like seeing the old, like there's like old YC founders that are doing YC again. And it's like, they've gone through YC, they've learned all of these tokens of wisdom and still have decided like, hey, I want to be in this incubator. I want to be in this community to build my second business. So I think it always has value.
When you think of the entrepreneurial roller coaster, because as you're describing, there's a lot of like ups and downs there, right? So it's like you have the traction, you get that first customer, you send that cold email customer, and then you're like fighting an uphill battle. And then it's like confidence kind of sinks. What are you doing, Shaun, when things are going well? Like maybe now today's era, or like after you got 3 weeks, 36K in ARR, and it's like, we're crushing it. Things are rolling. It's on the up. But then also, so like, what are you doing in those moments? But then what are you doing when things are not going well? You're down and out. You're like, man, can I even get up tomorrow and like keep fighting? How are you pushing harder in those high moments? And what are you doing to get out of those low moments? If you could answer both of those questions.
Yeah, in the high moments, the biggest thing is like seeing the hard work that you're putting in and really like not salivating in it, but like taking it in and saying like, okay, like this is work I put in. This is the effort. And I've seen it realized in a lot of instances. Like, that's super important. And also, like, I think if you've done a sale or if you've done you've worked with the client, like you can recreate that experience. And we always like to say in YC, like one of the speakers would say like a magic moment. And it's like, oh, like we're creating, it just feels like you're like a little magician, like creating magic moments with your customers, right? Like you've really solved the problem that they have. And like you are kind of this wizard bringing them this like cool new technology. So that's like those high moments. Like I always like, oh, I'm a little magician. Like that's what I try to kind of think about. And the low moments, I think that's where this conviction piece that I was telling you about before comes in. Like if you're convicted about the idea that you're working on, that makes it like, I think 100 times easier in those low moments, because you're never questioning, oh, is this the right thing to do? It's just, how can I execute better? And I think the difference between those two questions is like fundamental to running a business. Like, is this the right thing to do? Like, should I be doing a different idea? I think that's the worst case scenario to be in, versus I know I'm convicted about this idea. I know it'll work. This is just an off day, and I'm going to have, I might have 10 more off days before I have a good day, but that good day is worth the 10 low days, one might say.
That said, I think it still is difficult when you go through those low moments and you're like, man, like today's a bad day. I'm not feeling like, man, I just got to have conviction, right? I just got to So like, is there anything that like tactically, like specific, you go through that entrepreneur that like believes in their idea, they're having off days that you've done, that maybe it's like going back to like maybe your journal. It's like, let me remind myself as to why. It's going back to highlights you've had in the past. Maybe it's just simply going on walks, clearing your mind. Like, is there anything specific tactically that you do?
Yeah, I'm a big biker, so I always I think that's like my like release activities. Like, let me go on a bike ride, like touch grass, like enter reality. Like I always like to say, like we live in this like kind of fake world sometimes of like, being able to like work on a startup at 22 is like a privilege in itself. So I'm like, let me go back and like just like really experience the world for what it is, right? So I think that, and then also I think the biggest part about this experience, even on those low days, is like I'm friends with my co-founders, and that's helped us a lot because our relationship is like beyond the guise of our business, right? Like we are friends, we've been friends for a long time. So I think being able to lean on, like if I'm having an off day, like being able to lean on my co-founder who's like might be in a better spirit, in a better mood, is often like one of those big things about. That's why people like, I think YC recommends this, and a lot of people recommend to like build with someone else. Like you have a partner in crime, right? Like someone to help you build.
Right on. If you could solve any problem in your business right now, like the thing that's maybe keeping you up at night, or like that thing that gets you to that next level, like when we're talking, as you said, when we had our first conversation, is we're pushing hard. Next 12 months, we want to be up to 500K ARR. We want to raise $1 million in our seed, or our Series A, like raising money, like getting that next point. Like, what is the biggest hurdle that you're facing right now? What is that one thing that, if solved, would completely open up your business? I
just think like obviously getting more customers, that's like always the best answer to any of these questions. Like to do anything, you want to have more customers. But I think often like is like customers are on like legacy systems, like are on legacy software. So sometimes like implementing AI with those can be a difficulty, something that we're actively working through. And I think like we have the right team to really think about like how best to implement those solutions. So I would say that like how do you incorporate with, like these softwares that have been around for so long, and like both, like it's a mutual relationship where like we're trying to make those software companies better with our AI service, so that eventually those end clients can also be better serviced, right? Like you have all this technology, and sometimes like you are using a legacy provider like a POS system or a phone service or something, and it's like those companies have been around for so long, they've proven their business model, but sometimes it's hard to keep up with the change in the market. So I think we really bring this like unique perspective where we're working with both sides, like both the software providers and also the businesses that exist to like kind of bridge the gap in a lot of instances. So right, I think there's like having both relationships is often the hardest part. So really like making more of those relationships is what I would say.
Right on. We're going to finish this episode how we finish every episode here on Built from Scratch, Shaun. And it's with the quote that means the most to you. And when we were talking about this, you gave me a few quotes, and I love that you came to something that seems to mean a lot to you is your spiritual walk. And you gave me a quote or a Bible verse from Mark 8:36. And it says, "For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and yet forfeit his soul?" And I'd love for you to share with the audience what this quote means to you, but also how the next generation can take this as a means to change the world that we live in today.
Yeah, I think in a lot of instances, like when you're building a business or you're working on a project, like you can get really involved with it being about you and it being about, your persona, how people think about you, like as a person versus like as a company or as a society, or thinking about making the community better. And that's when I was in a sermon when I heard this verse, and it really, when you like your eyes perk up and you like look up and like at the person preaching, and like it really changed my perspective, because I was like, like I've been doing all of these things, but with what intention, right? Like, am I trying to make myself better? Am I trying to make God better? Am I trying to make my community better? Like, what is the intention with I'm doing these activities? And I think in a lot of instances, like it like makes you realize like everything that you're doing hopefully is for your, your creator, your greater good, or whatever it is. Like if you are, you're non-religious, like it might be for your community. For me, it's like everything I'm doing is to praise God in some way, right? Like to make the world a better place, like hopefully is a part of that. Or like even something that's like, like implementing AI technology in small businesses, right? Like it might sound small, but like if you get the opportunity to actively change someone's life, like make their life easier, like that is so valuable to them, you might not even realize, right? So I think that's kind of what I've been thinking about both in this quote, right? Like both being humble, like it's not about me, it's about my community. And I think that's like the fundamental thing that you always have to think about. Like you don't want to be self-obsessed in any way. And also like the community is the only thing that's keeping, like, is there for you, like in a bad time, in a low day, like that you need those people around you who are supportive of your overall mission.
Everybody, that is Shaun Karakkattu with Atlog.ai. Shaun, where can the audience get in touch with you if they want to find your wicked cool AI product?
Yeah, you can just go to Atlog.ai, or you can send me an email at Shaun@Atlog.ai.
Perfect. Shaun, thanks for the time today.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, this was great.